Hi everyone. This is the Quizzical Purpose sprint review for Cord, sprint number 2. Um, this was a 2+ week sprint. We from the 14th through the 30th. We had ONS for the last week, so there were a lot of people who were pulled away for that. We did a pretty good job on this. We got 72 story points completed. We have a lot in progress and some to do. And nearly everything that was added mid-sprint got completed or is still in progress, which is nice to see. A few retrospective comments. Whenever we have to update something, it's kind of a minefield. I ran into a bunch of problems that seemed entirely unrelated to what I was updating when I started updating the XOS containers. So I guess maybe we should just make sure to plan for extra time if whenever we're doing an update to like our base platform level stuff. Andy?
So a bunch of us were going pretty deep into Kubernetes and Helm this sprint, and I think overall we have really positive views of Kubernetes and Helm as a platform for running XOS and other container systems on top of. So we talked a couple of weeks ago about this being kind of an experiment to see how that works out, running XOS on Kubernetes. But I personally think that the experiment has been really successful. And of course, we need to figure out what's our longer term strategy here. But assuming that we decide to really go all in on Kubernetes and Helm, it seems like we'll need to do a lot of thinking about how to really capitalize on this, because it's going to touch just about every bit of the process that we use for building and deploying and testing Cord right now. So yeah, just summary: positive experiment. I think this looks like a good direction to go in, but there's a lot of work to do to actually fully move in that direction.
Yeah, just to add to that, with this change, deployment cycles have gone from like 2 hours to 10 minutes. So this is huge in my mind, and I agree. It's great to capitalize on that to the greatest extent possible.
Thanks, Andy and Scott. Do we have any other comments?
I think if Luca was here, he would echo the positive review of Kubernetes and Helm.
I have just one comment. I do view this movement towards Kubernetes as more than just a piece of more than just movement. I would be very happy if we as a team think about it as an opportunity to fix things that we think are not really optimal. We are already doing that, but I think every time we revisit a component that needs to be moved or it needs to interface in a certain way in Kubernetes, if there have been long-standing issues and say, okay, this doesn't feel right, or this doesn't seem to be the right thing to do or the right way of doing it, even if it means we spend 1 or 2 extra cycles, we probably should go towards a re-architecture that we have always been wanting to do. I just want us to view this as an opportunity, because I'm pretty sure as we move along, more and more deadlines and more pressing deadlines will keep coming, and we will always have to postpone what we really wanted to do, whether that's security, being able to build images, testing. We have really large chunks of features and functionalities. Revisiting them and re-architecting them, not just for Kubernetes, but overall, I think this is the best opportunity. We have an excuse to say, oh, we are moving, so it's going to take time, So I think we should do that. I don't think we'll get this opportunity later, or at least in the near future.
Thanks, Gopi. Anyone else? Okay, I'm going to switch over to Jira, and we'll go through what happened this sprint. So, first item in deployments and build automation, using the automation containers pre-built on Docker Hub. This was something that popped between Luca and me. We were rebuilding the containers that are used by Mass. These did get pushed to Docker Hub. Using them, this got kind of hairy because we didn't really have a good profile to test them on. And I need to get back with Luca to figure out exactly how we intend to use that. Also, we didn't have automation for building them. They're just being built one-off and pushed up. So it would be nice to have them done in some sort of automated way. So this is still outstanding. Let's see. Dynamic loading and provisioning of services. Scott?
Yeah, so eliminating unnecessary core policy code that was just remaining cleanup of stuff that we saw in the core that has since been obsoleted by wrappers inside of the XOS client. Versioning of XOS components. That was an item to get the version files implemented so that we can have fine-grained versioning of components, so each component will report its version. So that is done for the XOS core and all of the XOS services in the RCord profile. And I'm not sure if we have an item on here, but Mateo also plumbed that through to the GUI, so we can get a nice list of services in the GUI and all of their version numbers. Git load status API should tell whether apps were loaded successfully. So this was to help out with some of the new Kubernetes workflows, where it would be nice to be able to tell that the core is set up and all of the services are set up, so that we can proceed with the next phase of deploying that we're waiting on those. So there's now an API, and it tells you which services are online.
Thanks, Scott. Moving on to eCord, there wasn't anything. Expanding QA coverage. Kailash, are you there? I think Suchitra's on PTO, so.
Yep. Yeah, I'm here, so I can go over these, the tasks that we got done. So the first one here, migrating an existing QA job to the new Jenkins using JJB. So we completed that, and as you guys know from a couple of check-ins this morning, the build was failing. So the job template of the JJB is done. I still need to iron out a few errors. I was trying to do that last night, but for some reason my test check-ins on one of the repos wasn't triggering the build. But then I saw a couple of check-ins on the XOS repo was getting triggered, and that caused a lot of build failure. So I'll iron that out. But in terms of the job getting created through JJB, that's done. So we can now start migrating more of the jobs, of our QA jobs. Right now we only have the API sanity test job that got migrated. And then the next one here, so Cord 2781, validate end-to-end service chain. So we did not complete that. I think there's still some changes that are in flight or some unknown in terms of the API changes that need to be done. So the test scripts have not been updated for that. So that didn't get completed. I think it's on hold. Let's see, 2770, new test validation for the new service chain. I believe this is the same with the one before. I think there's still some changes in flight there that are unknown, so that's on hold. 2771, updating the Sanity pod script. I have a working script right now. It's not complete because we still have yet to deploy Kubernetes on a physical pod. I tried it on an experiment, on a Cloudlet experiment on top of KubeSpray. So I've been testing on that, but we still have yet to deploy it on a physical pod. And I saw that, I think it was Zach or Andy, I think one of you guys deployed it on a pod and wrote up some document on validation on that. So I'll take a look at that, and I'll start working on deploying it on our QCT pods and writing an automation script that goes with our nightly build cycle. So that's in flight. It didn't get done, but hopefully by next sprint I'll complete that. And then the last one here, Cord 2872. So Suchitra has made a scale test for the VCPE containers on a physical pod. So we'll now be able to start getting some numbers in terms of how many containers we can spin up per compute node, and get some input on that. So that was completed as well.
Thanks, Kailash. I have one item here. That's the Cord 2850 JGB job for running SonarQube. I was waiting a lot on some of the other JGB work, which sounds like it's done. So I think I'm unblocked for that for next sprint. That's a low priority item. Okay, moving on. Fabric features and improvements. Is Andrea? I think Andrea is traveling, or Pierre. Are either of them around?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So basically, in this sprint, we are rewriting a multicast feature in ARMS. These to support new use cases that are coming for Travis that needs dual home sync, multiple source support. So Andrea basically did rewriting. Did a rewriting of the multicast application in ARMS, the multicast route service that now is a standalone application, no more in the ONOS core, and it did also API refactoring to support this dual. Other basically work on Trellis and on the forwarding and the support for this use case in forwarding. The first item, 2856, actually it is a bug fix. We have a bug fix on the GUI, honest GUI that basically does not allow traffic on the dual home host. Together with this item, I work a little bit also with the QA team in order to integrate OSDPA and standard Linux host in test-on framework. We wrote together a test plan for this new feature as regards to multicast. Then Cord 2828 is basically support for a more generic topology as regards to multicast. This means I don't know. Yeah, more generic topology, not only simple leaf spine fabric. Then I think Andrea has just one change that is not done. Actually, the change is on Garrett, so we need review and someone that will push the button. As regards my changes, also the 2838 and the 2834, they are all on Garrett. We need a code review. The only item that we didn't start because basically we didn't have time. We had a very tough sprint, a lot of things to do. Hopefully, we will start this new item in the next sprint. Thanks.
Thanks, Pierre. Moving on, MCord. Do we have anyone from the MCord team?
Yes. Hey guys, can you still hear us?
Yes. Yes, we can hear you.
Zach, if you're speaking, we are not able to hear you, at least in Menlo.
Can you hear me now?
I think we are connected.
Hello, can you hear me now in Menlo?
Anyone else can speak?
Let me try to.
Andy,
I don't see that, guys.
Can you hear me?
yes, Andy, we can hear you. Can you guys hear Zach?
Turn off your audio, Zach, and I'll turn mine on.
I've
Okay.
not heard Zach since he asked if there was anyone from MCord. That was the last time.
Me too.
Yeah.
But Zach, we're not.
So yeah, so we just switched the audio to my computer. Hopefully this will work.
I assume that there are all these things were probably held up by or demos done at OMS.
Yeah, that would be my expectation. I know that they fixes for the build to try to bring them in line with what they have working at MWC. It is I don't know how complete those bug fixes are. Part of and also documentation, I guess, is the other big thing that they're working on. But I think you're right that they got pulled away to MWC. Probably didn't have a chance to complete that.
Okay, thanks, Andy.
I mean, pulled away to ONS. Sorry.
Yeah.
Too many TLAs.
Okay, moving on to maintenance. So I'll start. So I created a QA manifest. So previously you had to use Git review to do all of the stuff with the manifest files. And now that we have JJB jobs and other things, I created a specific repo manifest so you can use repo to manage those instead of Git review, which is a quality of life improvement. So this has the QA manifest, the main manifest for Cord, and the CI repo in it, so you can use repo to manage all of those. I've posted instructions to this on the QA channel in Slack. But I'll probably document it somewhere else. The 2829 fixed dependencies in Kubernetes makefile targets. This was a problem where it was possible to invoke when you were building the I think Cord Cube or Control Cube scenario. It was possible to invoke something before the images were built. The local Ubuntu dev enablement target, which is broken in 1604 because it was trying to ask for Apache packages that are no longer in 1604, but were in 1404. Cord 2871. There are some issues after updating to Ubuntu Xenial as the XOS core container or the XOS base container. Where the protobufs wouldn't reload properly. Protobuf library started caching things or something to that effect. So there are a bunch of patches that dealt with a synchronizer framework that I modified, and I also updated and changed how the protos that we're using that are upstream for Google APIs for HTTP are included. Previously, we were doing some kind of crazy stuff by the Python include statement dynamically on load, which was kind of confusing. And then 2875 prep pub scenario broken. So there's a dependency that needed to be on building the images, so you could bring up XOS before the images were built, which broke. So I re-established that dependency. Something I'm still working on is 20. In the API that we're using, because we're calling the internal Ansible API for that. So some changes. That's it for me. Scott?
Yeah, so this upgraded gRPC to 1.91. Lots of little nits where things had been renamed in gRPC from the old 9.1 relatively version we were using to the newer. There was also something in the ORM where we had a mechanism to look up models by name, which wasn't straightforward anymore. So resolve a bug that we had back when I did the restarting Chameleon and restarting Tosca work. It did not resolve that bug. So we had to would that bug remains. That's it for this item.
Do we have Mateo there?
Not in this meeting room.
Okay. I do. People, I think I related. So that 2069 Scott mentioned tells these service versions. Those looks like the other two.
Okay, so with Ansible 2.5 running on the
Bar.
right, if you have Ansible 2.5 installed, it is throwing an error in the Ansible playbook in the mass repository when it tries to configure network interface. A patch under review right now to fix this problem, hoping by the end of the day it'll be resolved. I guess my plan is to I have actually broken if you're using the current Ansible. That's it.
Thanks, Andy. Moving on. Nothing in offline.
Things will be
The OLT and Volta. Can anyone speak to these things? I know that he's been writing a bunch of documentation on the Volta. Related to the side. Let's see, a lot of things. I've been working on in upgraded Xenial. Were created after the start of the sprint and are dependent. And this item 22 update for 76 depends on those to get completed. So that's what's been generating a lot of work for me.
waiting for my screen to update so I can see what you're looking at. Okay, so at the start of the sprint, we created a Helm chart design document where we kind of listed the principles that through just some spirited debate on what those principles are, but I think we agreed on a set that we could use to push forward. We had and yeah, I can just continue. So that I don't recall exactly. I guess this was for Helm charts. If you don't specify any configuration variables, you will get a working system just with the defaults, but you might want to configure it for a deployment. And so we created some examples of how to configure different aspects of the system and put it in an examples directory in the Helm charts repo. So I expect we'll add to that as other things that we want to configure come up. That's, yeah, so there was already a Helm chart for the XOS core that Gopi did, and I contributed charts for the services that we're using in the rCord Lite profile, the address manager and Fabric and Ono service, and there's a couple more. So those are in place. Core 2831 was extracting the Tosca recipes from the current RCord profile and paring them down and adding them to the Helm chart as config maps. So that was done. Service dependencies in the RCord's light profile, that just was tying the service charts into the profile chart. Configuring ONOS service, that's pretty self-explanatory. Just setting things up so that ONOS service could talk to ONOS. Cord 2843, configuring Volt service to talk to Volta. That's not currently done. We are right now trying to get Volta running with the OLT. So I expect then we will add the, once we get that, the configuration between Volta and XOS and ONOS. Finally, validate on the hardware and document. So it is all of the XOS charts on WarePod right now, and Luca and I have been documenting the setup steps in Google Docs. It'll still need a little bit more polishing before it's ready for public consumption, but our hardware, yeah, I considered this basically complete.
Okay, thank you. For my items, 2846 have image build on multi-tag images and push them to Docker Hub. Previously, images were just tagged with the git commit hash. This changes that to tag things with their branch tag, so like master or cord-6.0. So that branch tag plus the git commit hash, and also if there is a specific other tag on the image. So if when we get to release time, we'll release things with 6.0.0 as the image tag, and it's set up now so that it will tags and then push them to Docker Hub when as needed. So that automation is done. And then tag, I had some lower priority items. One was figuring out how to make the Postgres database used by XOS high availability. There are a few projects out there that do this, that use Kubernetes to do this. So exploring those, we haven't actually tried that. This is more of a 6.0 release, but it would be nice to have it working sometime mid develop cycle. And my last item was a validation job for Helm charts. This was waiting on the JGB work that Kailash was doing. So it's pretty simple. Helm has its own lint functionality, so basically we just run that against the over the Helm charts that we commit. That's it for me. Scott?
Yeah, so this first one is the core container should be resilient to database connectivity issues. There were two parts to that. The first part was we can't really order containers come up in Kubernetes, so there was a problem where the core container was coming up before the database and the core container would fail. So we resolved that by adding a step that waits for Postgres connectivity. The second phase to that is to make the container itself resilient to other database connectivity losses. For example, if you lose the database while you're in the middle of doing an operation. There was an existing module in pip for that for Django modification, so I've modified it, and I'm just waiting on getting that integrated. So we ran into this situation. I think Sapin ran into it with an Xproto parser at some point where there's third-party module and we don't want to host it ourselves. So we hosted it in private. We pushed it to pip. I'm just waiting to hear back from the owner of the original package to see if he wants it pushed back via a pull request back to his original. We just start putting our revised version on pip. The next one was automate execution of Tosca recipes in Kubernetes. So we had a meeting and we wrote up a document on this, outlined several proposals. For The decision we so fortunately, Andy already had a variant of this simple thing done. So we've been using that for now. I imagine if we have time next sprint, we will move to doing some of the committed things and VOLT to subscriber. So this was an issue that popped up because of the VSG hardware service that we're using in the RCord Lite profile. It didn't have a creator. Tried to set the creator, it failed. So what we decided to do there was to move creator all the way up to make it part of the subscriber object. And then each service that needed to reference a creator could reference it from the subscriber. And this got it got the VSG hardware service and the RCord Lite profile working without adversely affecting the legacy RCord profile and legacy VSG services. So that's it.
Thanks, Scott. Looking for other Cord 2779, Gopi.
Still in progress. I hope to have the basics ready by the end of the day today. I don't think I'll be able to test it this afternoon. If Andy is available, I'd like to go through what I'm doing with the Helm chart and compare it with what he and Luca did with the existing Kubernetes resources, so that we can see if I'm missing something. It'll probably be early next week before we are able to test the Helm chart and make sure that it's actually working with ONOS that's already there.
So if you're going to have a meeting on that to go over it, I would like to attend as well, just to add to my Helm chart knowledge.
Sure. So what I'm doing right now is, like I mentioned in the stand-ups in the last couple of days, I'm paring the set of resources down to make it the minimal necessary set of resources that we deploy ourselves. I'm trying to use off-the-shelf components for the utilities that are being used in Volta. Once I'm through with that, I can set up this meeting with you, Scott, and Andy, and yeah, we can go through what I did.
Yeah, that all sounds good.
That's it from me.
Thanks, Gopi. RCord Zero Touch subscriber positioning for NoVSG. This looks like a bunch of things that were assigned to Matteo. He created the VSG hardware service. To my understanding, this is a pretty empty service currently.
That's right. Yeah, it just loads some models. That's all it does.
Okay, and I think the rest of these are related to Volta, probably dependent on Volta and ONOS being ready for this. So I guess those are still outstanding and dependent on the Volta work. Moving on, issues without epics. A couple that were Matteo's. I think this 2810, can you talk about that, Scott?
Yeah, so we have two kinds of state in the data model. We have declarative state, which kind of is pushed from the user, via REST or Tosca into the data model. And then we have feedback state, which comes up from the synchronizer, stuff like, this operation succeeded or failed, and error messages and bookkeeping state about when we're going to run again. So what this does is it enforces that the user cannot change that state. That state can only be changed from the synchronizer. So no one else should be altering the synchronizer's private status stuff that it's putting in the database other than the synchronizers. I think there may be a way to override that for development or administrative purposes if you actually need to correct something. But in the general sense, that stuff should all be set by synchronizers only.
Thanks, Scott. I think this 2796 RCord service, is that related to the Tosca stuff?
So I think what we had is the RCord. So we have the Cord subscriber root objects, which belong to an RCord service, but that RCord service did not have its own specific model in the database. It was just a normal service model. So I think what Mateo probably did there is to create a new model called RCord service, make it its descendant of service. That was something that there was comments in the code that we needed to eventually do that, and he probably just had time to do it.
Okay, thanks, Scott. Kailash?
Yeah, so this, we made a test target in the make file to allow developers or anybody for that matter to run the API test locally before, trying to push it into Get review if you have any questions or anything. So we made that. I still need to iron out the automation of, well, we're auto-generating the test, but it's I still need to iron out a simpler way to do that. So this is dependent on that, but I'll probably get to that, early next week or something.
Okay, thanks, Kailash. Just so people know, if you have things, there's some quick filters up here. If you're going to be moving something from the previous sprint to the next sprint in prep for sprint 3, you can click this from sprint 2 and like in progress. This will show everything that was in progress that but didn't get done, or to do. You can't have them both selected because they're exclusive. And then you can just grab something and drag it down into the next sprint if you want to easily add things from the previous sprint into the next sprint. Just a quick little Jira tip.
I do have a quick question about the next sprint or the next couple of sprints. Do we have a theme? Because the last couple of sprints have been about the ABC deadline. Do we have a theme for what's coming? Because I personally would like to kind of go back to at least the semi-long-term vision of trying to get the data plane networking in. Any of the traditional RCord, traditional star cord services in RCord and eCord, but they're not associated with any specific deadline as far as I can tell. But I want to move in the direction for 6.0. Is there a theme that we have in mind?
So we have like the document that Luca prepared. Should we start from that outlined the 6.0 alpha and final releases?
Okay, yeah, that
I think that's a good idea. I also think that it's important for us to, like per Andy's comment here, that we need to think about how we QA all of this stuff and build and deploy. We've been doing a lot of experimentation, but turning that into production ready, especially making sure that that we're doing all the QA that we need to do on this to get it released. The earlier we do that, the stronger the release is going to be. So I think if that could be part of this next sprint, that would be really useful.
Yeah, the one point of, I wouldn't say caution, but one point to keep in mind is there are a set of rules or requirements for being production ready, and there are a set of rules and requirements for helping with developer lifecycle, and they're not always the same. So if we have tasks, I believe that what we did so far was to improve the developer cycle, make it more efficient, like Scott said. I do think that is going to be an ongoing thing, but I completely agree that we also need to think about how somebody would deploy this in production, because I think if you try and do both, there'll be some conflicts.
I don't necessarily disagree with that, but I do think that improving just the process overall is very important. Okay. If we move on and we look at the schedule, the next sprint starts next Monday and lasts for 3 weeks. It goes till the 20th. And I have down here sprint planning Monday 4/2. This date or time is probably going to change as we figure out how that's going to work in the next day or so, so that it's not conflicting with other meetings. Are there any other final comments?
I guess a question that I have, and maybe we can't answer it on this call, is are we going to issue some kind of 6.0 alpha release that contains the Helm charts and documentation of how to deploy them? I don't think we're quite ready to do that yet, but if we are planning on preparing that as like a point release or an alpha release, then I think we're going to need to set aside some time in the next sprint and make that a priority. So
Wasn't there,
that's, I guess.
I thought the ABC deadline was the natural deadline for doing the alpha release. I thought that was what we agreed on. Maybe I'm wrong.
It would be nice to have more confirmation from above and when people are talking about this, about what the deadline is and what it comprises, to help us guide through this process. I guess we need to raise that with all those different interested parties.
So what I heard was that the ABC deadline was sometime in the middle of May. What we have today was an arbitrary deadline for setting some discipline internally for ourselves, but the actual deadline is in the middle of May. I kind of distinctly remember that the last time we spoke about this as a team, I think it was one of the engineering team meetings, I thought that the alpha release, or whatever we are calling it, the interim release 5.1 or 6.0 alpha, was supposed to be for the May middle deadline. Maybe I'm dreaming, but I thought that's what we decided.
Yeah. Let's take this offline and figure it out in the next couple of days so that we can know how to plan appropriately. Okay. Any other comments? If not, I'm going to close the meeting.
So I had maybe not a comment, but just a question, and that is the VSG hardware service. As we pointed out, it's currently just a stub that really doesn't do anything. It seems to me that for the trial use case, it's going to need to do something, and that most of that work I would think is going to be in the ONOS domain. So maybe it's something we can't really answer without Jono. But I assume that has to be scheduled for work sometime soon, so we can actually do end-to-end testing of some sort.
Yeah, I think what I heard was that it depended on some functionality that's being added to the fabric that is not complete. So yeah, I think that's blocked, but you're right that we need to plan for that and figure out if there's anything that we can kind of do in parallel.
Yeah, so maybe that should be a subject of the planning meeting. It's just to get that dependency chain, so that we all know what it is and we all know what's blocked on.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other comments? Alrighty. I feel like this last sprint has gone pretty well. The things that are still to do or in progress, I think, are blocked on either external things like Volta work, or blocked on things that were practical, like having to present, like import stuff, having to present at ONS. So I think we should be pretty happy with ourselves for this. That's it. Talk to everyone later.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.